Some stories, they have like a timeline themselves when they're ready to be told. And until it's time for them to be told, you sort of can't tell them, right? And for my solo show, I never really felt like I had the ending. And just recently I became a grandmother, and now I feel like I can write the ending to it because it came full circle. But it was just sort of,
Look at her, grandma.
Yeah, but what I did was I started sharing pieces of it. I didn't wait for the whole thing to be done. Right? I jumped in and I was like, wow, I have this 10-minute story. I'm going to start telling this 10-minute story. And now I have this 10-minute story. I'll start telling this 10-minute story. And now I'm part of a storytelling show in Hollywood. The director's actually in New York right now. She's trying to get it to play in New York. So, I just encourage everybody to start telling your stories wherever they're at right now, because that's how they get developed and that's how they form, is by sharing them. As many times with as many people as you can, you're constantly getting feedback on that story.
Yeah.
So don't wait until it's like in that perfect format to start sharing it. Just start sharing it right away.
Yeah, good. Tell them what the first thing, like when you one of our clients calls and says, here's my story, what's the first thing you do? Typically when you need to, get this story honed, what's the first thing you tell them? What do you do?
Well, the first thing I do is I ask a ton of questions. I need to understand your business and how you're planning to use the story, where you're planning to use the story, what kind of audiences you talk to, what purpose you want the story to serve for you. Because there's something about having kind of the right story for the right people told in the right way at the right time, so that everything lines up. Then you have real magic. And so the first thing I do is just ask a lot of questions, because very often you have a point of view about your story and you're not seeing it objectively. Right? I worked with a client the other day, and she ended up with a story, and I gave her sort of the beats of the story, and she went and she told her husband that story that same night. And he said, I've known you 17 years. I've never knew this about you. I never knew this story after knowing you for 17 years. And she said, well, Mary asked the right questions. Like, sometimes you don't even know the aspects of your story that you're not sharing because they don't seem important to you, but you are not thinking about your story from the perspective of the person who's going to be receiving it on the other end. And so that kind of objectivity I look at things from the audience perspective, and there's things that you might not be revealing that you don't think are important, but from the audience perspective are very important, because ultimately what your story is designed to do is to take the audience on the same emotional journey that you went through when you lived the story. I was thinking about this when you were up here this morning.
Yeah.
When you were telling your story this morning. If you notice, Bo doesn't tell stories. Bo relives stories in front of you. And that's a big difference. A lot of people are out telling stories, but that's very different than reliving a story with an audience. And ultimately, when you are reliving it with the person telling it, it's a much richer experience for you as an audience member.
That's great. That's really great. Take that to heart. That is true. Most people are they have a distance from their own story. Like they're disemboweled from their own story. They're telling it as if they're the third person. If I can be those lawyers over there, and I can be my mom, instead of telling you, hey, I've got this mom, and she's really strong lady. Instead of doing that, why don't I just go like this with the phone? And be her, and then run out to the backyard, and then run back. And that tells you everything you need to know about my mom. I don't need to list off a bunch of statistics my mom is. Everyone understand? I don't have to tell about characteristics of people. All I do is be my mom, and those characteristics are revealed. Everybody understand this? That's true storytelling.